Have you ever wondered what happens when you push the wrong girl too far? Avery Wallace felt the hall's fluorescent lights blur as Officer David Reed stepped into her path that Wednesday between third and fourth period. She clutched her textbooks to her chest, eyes down, focused, determined, valedictorian-bound at 16, with dozens of early acceptance letters nestled in her inbox. Avery wasn't afraid of Reed's uniformed authority patrolling Melrose High's corridors. She'd been stopped before, back when she drove home from the library one night and he'd pulled her over at the stop sign on County Road 12. Back then, his questions had felt like thinly veiled threats. "Where are you going? What's in that bag?" But she'd answered politely and he'd let her go. That afternoon, Avery barely registered the chuckles of the few students gathered by the cafeteria doors. She habitually kept her head down, blending into the background. As she neared Reed, her binder brushed his hip. The plastic water bottle in his hand tipped, and a cold stream drenched her white blouse. Gasps erupted, her papers scattered like startled birds. Reed's smirk widened as he glanced at the crowd. "Watch it, young lady," he drawled, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Avery froze, chest pounding. Her hair clung in damp strands to her forehead. Her shirt stuck to her skin. Humiliation burned hotter than the water's icy sting. She didn't cry in the bathroom, didn't break down in the nurse's office, and she certainly didn't let anyone see the tremor in her fingertips as she picked up her scattered papers. With a steady breath, she pivoted away, stepping around fissures of laughter like stepping stones, because she had learned early that showing emotion only gave them more ammunition. But this incident wasn't random. Reed had been tracking her. 2 weeks earlier, he'd appeared outside the library at closing time, arms crossed, watching her shelve books as if she were some suspicious character. The night before, he'd waited in his patrol car at the bus stop outside her job at the local cafe, just staring. Avery's mother, Grace Wallace, had told her, "These things will pass." But Avery felt a ripple of unease tighten in her chest, a warning she could not ignore. What she didn't know, and couldn't have guessed, was that her quiet dignity had infuriated more than one person at Melrose High. Tyler Reed, son of Officer Reed and Avery's lab partner in AP Literature, had resented her ever since she corrected him in debate class on systemic bias. He'd lost his top spot in the class ranking to her, and his pride had turned bitter. The whispers and side glances fluttered in the corners of the room. Avery sensed Tyler's eyes on her, filled with unspoken grievance. Later that evening, Avery paced the kitchen of her suburban home in southern Arkansas, staring at her soaked blouse pinned to a chair. The front door rattled as a pair of muddy boots entered the foyer. She froze. Colonel Marcus Stone, her father, had returned from a classified mission overseas. Rarely did he announce his comings and goings. He simply appeared when duty called. Avery felt her heart skip, not from relief but from the unspoken question, could he know what happened today? In the living room, Colonel Stone removed his field jacket and set down a weathered duffel bag. His posture was as exacting as ever, straight-backed, unflinching eyes scanning the room for signs of the world's injustices. Grace looked up from the stove, concern etched on her face. Avery swallowed and, voice trembling, recounted the hallway incident, the laughter, the water, Reed's smug face. She expected anger, a guttural roar of protection. But instead, her father nodded once and retreated to his home office, closing the door with soft finality. That night, while the rest of the house slept, Colonel Stone sat surrounded by stacks of documents. Reed's public service record, student complaints filed years ago, incident reports riddled with vague but troubling language. His laptop glowed with spreadsheets of traffic stops, internal affairs summaries, patterns that few had ever bothered to connect. He'd commanded Delta Force for over a decade, orchestrating covert operations in hostile territories worldwide. Yet this task, unraveling the story of his daughter's harassment, demanded the same precision and discretion. Avery, unable to sleep, pressed her ear to her father's closed door. Behind the low hum of his reading lamp, she heard the quiet scratch of pen on paper as he annotated margins, circled names, and plotted his next move. In that moment, she realized her humiliation would not go unanswered. Deep inside, something shifted. The invisible armor she wore every day, the silence, the head down, The refusal to feed into their assumptions had a powerful ally. Tomorrow Melrose High would wake to a different kind of storm. As dawn broke, Avery dressed in a crisp, dry blouse. She looked into the mirror, practiced the calm, steady gaze she'd honed over years, and whispered to herself, "This isn't just about me." The hallway incident had been the spark. The conflagration was about to begin, and Avery Wallace, once forced into silence, was ready to speak through the roar of truth. That morning, Melrose High awoke to an undercurrent of tension. Whispers rippled through the halls before the first bell, glancing furtively at the auditorium doors, where morning announcements usually hummed to life. Nobody knew why Principal Denise Thornton looked so pale, or why the local paper's headline had suddenly appeared on the students' phones. Honor student harassed by school resource officer, father speaks out. Avery slipped into her first period chemistry lab, heart thundering. Every eye seemed trained on her, the girl who'd weathered water, laughter, and public humiliation. She sat at her usual bench, books open but untouched. Her mind replayed the events of yesterday, then slipped beyond to the hush in her father's study as he worked through the night. She felt a fragile stirring of hope that maybe someone would finally see her not as a target, but as a person. Across town, Colonel Marcus Stone arrived at the Melrose High front office unannounced, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit rather than fatigues. His presence alone commanded respect. Teachers and staff acknowledged him with deferential nods. Principal Thornton ushered him into her office, where a stack of manila folders sat between them. Avery imagined her father's measured tone as he laid out damning evidence: internal affairs complaints, traffic stop transcripts, campus surveillance stills, each document a carefully placed stone in a dam that had finally burst. Meanwhile, the cafeteria echoed with nervous chatter. Friends of Avery hovered in small clusters, hesitating to approach. Tyler Reed's usual entourage fell silent when he trudged in, eyes darting away from Avery's calm silhouette. He knew the story had gone beyond gossip. He'd seen the documents his father tried to shred, felt the weight of his own complicity. A sudden pang of guilt flickered across his features. By midday, the Pine Bluff Police Department's badge board looked thinner. Officer David Reed's crimson badge sat under a letter of suspension. The memo cited pending investigation and serious breach of professional conduct. Text alerts pinged students across the district, and social media flooded with screenshots of Reed's previously sealed complaint files. Avery glanced at her phone, realizing her father had used not only legal channels but also his network of contacts, retired colleagues, civil rights attorneys, investigative journalists, to ensure every fact was laid bare. In U.S. government class, Mr. Reynolds cleared his throat at the front of the room. He slid a printed article across each desk. Arkansas Tribune. Students' quiet courage sparks accountability. He looked at Avery with quiet pride. "This is civics in action," he said, "a reminder that our system can work when we hold it to account." A ripple of applause followed, genuine and warm. Avery felt her shoulders relax. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't alone. Yet the day's most significant moment came in the library's back corner. A group of juniors, 2 boys and a girl, approached Avery. Their voices trembled as they shared stories: unjust athletic field citations, unwarranted traffic stops, offhand harassment that mirrored Avery's experiences. As each voice joined the chorus, Avery listened, absorbing the sorrow, anger, and relief that came with being heard. When they finished, she spoke softly but with authority. "We're not alone, and we won't be silenced again." That afternoon, the school board convened an emergency session. Colonel Stone, flanked by a civil rights attorney, took the podium. He spoke not as a vengeful father, but as a citizen and disciplinarian of his child's dignity. His words measured, precise, unyielding, detailed patterns of misconduct and systemic bias. Board members exchanged uneasy glances as he concluded, "We must not merely punish one officer, we must examine the culture that allowed this to happen." In the bleachers, Avery watched her father. She saw the same steely resolve that had guided him through hostile deserts and insurgent strongholds. She understood that this fight was not about spectacle, but about lasting change. When the session adjourned with unanimous calls for policy reform and bias training, A swell of approval rose from parents and students alike. Avery felt a surge of vindication. Her father's quiet strength had done what anger alone never could. Walking home under the golden late afternoon sun, Avery reflected on the day's events. She remembered the icy shock of water on her skin, the sting of laughter in her ears, and the cold assumption that she would remain powerless. But she also remembered her father's careful preparations, the solidarity of her classmates, and the truth laid bare for all to see. At home, she found him in his study again, documents organized, files annotated for the next phase. He looked up when she entered, exhaustion softening his typically impassive expression. "You did well today," he said. Avery folded her arms around him in a rare embrace. She whispered, "We did it together." That night, as Riley, the family's golden retriever, snored softly at their feet, Avery penned an article for the teen column at the Arkansas Tribune, a first-person reflection on dignity, justice, and the courage to demand accountability. She titled it, "Silence Isn't Surrender." Have you ever wondered what it feels like when the truth finally meets you face to face? A week after the school board meeting, Melrose High seemed quieter. No more frantic whispers, no more sideways glances. The halls still held their fluorescent buzz, but now it carried a note of cautious respect. Avery Wallace walked them with a steady gait and a sense of grounded purpose she had never known before. That morning, she arrived early for her restorative dialogue with Officer David Reed. The district office conference room was spare. A long oval table, neutral walls, and a clock that ticked loudly in the silence. Reed sat fidgeting in his uniform shirt and tie, unaccustomed to this setting where he was neither the authority nor the accuser. Avery took a seat directly across from him, her binder closed on the table, pages neatly stacked, just like she preferred everything in her life, except today she felt ready to let it all feel messy. The mediator, a soft-spoken counselor named Ms. Patel, outlined the process. "This is about listening and being heard. Avery, you'll speak first." She nodded and inhaled deeply. "You humiliated me," she began, voice calm but charged. "You poured water on me in front of everyone. You turned me into a joke." She watched Reed's eyes flicker to her binder, then away. But it wasn't just that moment. She unfolded the list she had written. 2 traffic stops, the cafe observation, the cafeteria hallway. With each bullet, she felt the weight lift slightly, as though every word she spoke carried away a piece of the fear she'd carried alone. Reed swallowed, his knuckles white on the tabletop. I'm sorry," he stammered. I thought I was helping keep the school safe. I didn't mean to single you out." "It wasn't about safety," Avery said. "It was about power. Your son's power, closing ranks to remind me of my place." Her chest tightened as anger and sadness, laced with relief, pulled in her voice. "I've always been taught to mind my business, to be quiet. You reminded me every time I looked up." She paused, searching his eyes. "Do you understand how that feels?" Reed's gaze dropped. "Not fully," he admitted, "but I want to." For the next hour, they sat in that neutral space and laid bare truths that few would have ever dared express. Avery spoke of the loneliness of being laughed at, of the white-hot sting of humiliation and the cold hollow of pity. Reed spoke haltingly of his fear of losing authority, of feeling his son slipping from the top spot, of ingrained assumptions he never questioned. Assumptions he saw now were rooted in bias. By the end, they reached no grand reconciliation, no promises of friendship, but a fragile understanding. Reed acknowledged that his conduct violated the oath he'd taken to protect every student, not just those he deemed respectful. Avery accepted his apology without erasing the damage done. They shook hands, a simple gesture that felt like a truce in a battle she never wanted. Leaving the room, Avery exhaled the breath she'd been holding for months. Outside, the spring air smelled of honeysuckle and fresh rain. She closed her eyes, feeling the sun warm her face. She thought of the small library corner, where her classmates had shared their own stories, and of Principal Thornton's vow to overhaul training protocols. Change, she realized, wasn't a sudden eruption. It was fissures spreading through stone until it finally crumbled. That afternoon, Avery stood at the podium of the Student Leadership Summit in Fayetteville. dozens of faces looking up at her expectantly. She spoke with quiet conviction. I was the girl who kept her head down. I was the girl who never made a fuss. But when you silence a voice, you make it dangerous, because it will roar back when you least expect it. She paused, scanning the crowd. True power isn't shouting louder than everyone else. It's standing firm in your dignity when the world tries to drown you in noise. Her words resonated beyond the auditorium. Messages poured in. Younger students thanked her for inspiring them to speak up. Parents commended her father's quiet leadership. Even Tyler Reed reached out through a private school channel to apologize. She replied, "We won't always agree, but I hope we can learn from this." Back home, Marcus Stone listened as his daughter recounted the summit. He said little, but his eyes gleamed with pride. "You've done more than I ever could," he said softly. Avery smiled. The ache of those hallway moments transformed into purpose. A few weeks later, Melrose High unveiled its new student police liaison program, drafted in collaboration with civil rights groups and veteran officers. Reed, assigned to a desk job during retraining, volunteered to co-lead the bias awareness workshops. Principal Thornton invited Avery to join the advisory committee. In time, the program spread to neighboring districts. One cool evening in late May, Avery sat in the back seat of her father's SUV as they drove past Melrose High. The courtyard lights glowed softly through the windshield, and she spotted a group of students gathered for an outdoor study session. She took her father's hand on the seat. "Did we really change anything?" He glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "You changed a lot," he said. "You taught people that one quiet voice can shake an entire system." Avery watched the school fade behind them, knowing that true change was never final. It demanded vigilance, empathy, and the courage to speak truth quietly into lopsided halls. She thought back to the day water splashed across her shirt, the day that ignited everything. Her phone buzzed with a message from Mr. Reynolds. "I have no doubt your name will be remembered here long after graduation." Avery closed her eyes, letting a soft smile settle. Silence, she realized, isn't weakness. It's the calm before the storm of change. And once the truth walks into the room, it takes root in hearts that refuse to let it go.